oftentimes wedding pros can add 5 figures or more to their revenue in one single year without giving up more of their weekends. Yes, it's actually possible. And my guest on today's show is no stranger to Wedding Pro CEO. She's been on the podcast before, and she's actually joining our Wedding Pro CEO platform as our corporate events coach. And so today she's going to be talking all about how to add corporate events to your wedding business and what it can mean to your bottom line. Plus, if you stick around to the end, she's got a special offer just for our listeners, and I cannot wait to take you into it. So let's go. Susan, I am so excited to have you back on the show as always, because not only are you a returning guest here on the podcast, but I always love just getting an opportunity to chat with you anyway. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I love chatting with you too, as you know.
Yeah, you guys, Susan and I swear, I think I voice a memo back and forth with Susan more than any human in my phone. So we always are sharing ideas. And today we're going to be talking all about corporate events. And Susan, you've been on the show before talking really about how you can add corporate events to your bottom line. But when you were on the show last time, you had talked to us about a beta course that you were going to be launching. So did that happen?
It did. And it was so much fun. And we had some great results. So it was really, we had a good time and lots of people learning lots of good things for their businesses.
Yes. Okay, good. I want to dig into that a little bit. And then now you're basically like, yes, I'm here. I'm ready. Like we did the beta version. You figured out what people really needed to dig into, where they were getting stuck, that kind of thing. And so now you're like, this is it. It's time to launch this baby, right?
Absolutely. We are ready to go.
I love it. So we're going to talk a little bit about why corporate events are important to add to your bottom line, really how they can help you to scale here in 2025. I think all of us are looking for ways to put 2024 behind us. You know, there's a lot of pros who are like, 2024 was this wild ride, Susan and I included. So we're all like looking forward. And I think not only are we going to have just a banner engagement season. Like I am so primed and excited for this engagement season, but I think we're really looking for ways that we can just completely open the floodgates on our businesses. And I know inside my program, that's what we're looking to do. So let's talk a little bit about why would somebody even want to add corporate events to their wedding planning business? Can you kind of share a couple of reasons with us?
Absolutely. I think, first of all, they can be wildly profitable and there's so much less emotion. I think they can be a little bit more easygoing. It's a great way to add revenue if you're in a town that has, seasonal weddings. It's a great way to fill up the calendar in other ways. It's a great way to get weekday work. I mean, I think there are so many pros to adding corporate to your wedding business.
Yeah. And I mean, I think some of it we're all kind of like, yeah, that makes sense, right? Like you can add it in off season, you can add it during the weekdays. If you haven't done corporate events before, you don't realize how unemotional the money is, which sounds bad, but that's the truth, right? It's like
it's coming from someone's expense account. Yeah, it's not coming out of their personal discretionary spending. And it's great in a couple of ways. First of all, either they really are cut and dry. They're like, this is what we're spending. Here it is. Let's do it. That's it. So there's not this whole, oh, but I really want it, this, that, and the other. But also it can be that, okay, we're flexible. Here's what we're having, but you can show them something that they really like. And they're like, oh, cool, another $10,000. Fine, let's add it. It's quite a different experience very often than it is from doing a wedding.
Susan, one of the things that I think is really interesting, and I'm glad you've done this beta version now of the course, because sometimes I'm talking with you and you guys, the thing I think I tell Susan the most is you are too humble because you know, it's like she teaches us all how to add corporate events to our businesses, right? And we're thinking like, oh, we can add like $10,000 next year. We can add like $20,000, $50,000 if it's a stretch. Okay, Susan runs a multi-million-dollar corporate events planning business. Okay, so she needs to not be so humble about that. So I'll brag for her. But if you're a planner, if you're a photographer, if you're a DJ, florist, listening to this, and you're like, okay, well, now that feels completely out of reach. Susan, can you tell us about maybe some of the things that happened during your beta course? Because those were wedding pros who had never done corporate events, right? And they were trying to add. Can you tell us maybe what were some of the success stories coming out of that? Or what did you see that's a realistic amount of revenue that somebody could add to their business in 2025?
So one of my students, we chatted just a couple of weeks ago, and she's added 70,000 in revenue in the time. And that was like from February to now. And she still has a whole bunch in the pipeline that she's still working on booking. And these are planning fees. This is not like she's,
Right.
of course, paying out some staff and things like that, but that's what she added in to her income. I have another one who she didn't express her financial goals to me, but she
Yeah.
said, hey, I want to make sure that by the end of this year, I book 3 corporate events. And she reached out to me and she said, I didn't think I was going to make it, but man, I made it. I booked those corporate events.
Wow.
So it's definitely doable.
Yeah.
From our standpoint, even in my own business, the corporate business just keeps growing. We're up 40% over last year. It just keeps, and because you get repeat customers, right?
Mhm.
And over again. And then when people move on, they hand you off to somebody else. And it's just such a great way to add revenue.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. I mean, $70,000 would be a game changer for a
Yeah.
small business, especially because most of those events, if not all, were likely not on the weekends, right?
Not on the weekends, and of note, I think it was only 4 events. So, it
Wow.
was not like she added, it's not like adding another 60 weddings to my calendar, right? I
Right.
think she did it in 3 or 4 events.
That is honestly amazing. And the reason I kind of wanted to understand that was because, sometimes I think when we have listeners that are listening to the podcast or watching us on YouTube and they're like, okay, like the multi-millions feels out of reach, right? Like I wouldn't
Mhm.
even know how to start, though obviously you definitely started at some point,
Yes, we
right?
started.
Right. Everyone has to start somewhere. But if you're even looking to say, I want to increase my revenue by 50,000 next year. I mean, this is such a low hanging fruit. It's such an easy way
Yes.
to do that without, to Susan's point, having to add 30 weddings to your books,
Right.
to be able to
Absolutely.
do it.
Yeah.
What would you say, Susan, would be one of the first things that a wedding pro should do if they're even just thinking, is this something that I want to do? Like, what would be one of the first things that you would tell them to do?
I mean, I always suggest taking stock with the people you know, right? Presumably,
Okay.
you're killing it in your wedding business and you have a ton of different contacts. And these are the people that you can start networking with and talking to about building the corporate business. So I think that's, getting your networking in place. That's really huge. Secondly, thinking about how you're comfortable charging because there's so many different ways from percentage management fees to hourly fees. And that's something that, each of my students does it differently. And we go through and decide what we should really be charging for their services, because I will tell you, coming from weddings going into corporate, I've noticed that a lot of people hold back and they don't
Mm.
realize that they can charge a lot more and they're worth a lot more than they think they are.
Yeah, I can see that totally because you're right. In the wedding space, there are for sure, obviously, some people who are charging astronomical amounts of money, but for the most part, there feels like, a smaller cap than there would be in corporate events,
Yeah.
right? But can we talk about that for a second? Because before the show, and I said, Susan, can we touch on this during the show? Because I think some of that depends on what you do in the industry, right? So, like one
Mhm.
example you were sharing is a lot of corporate business, or even like you're a corporate meeting planner. You're not going to
Mhm.
go source six, eight, $10,000 wedding photographer to
Right.
come shoot a convention, right? Can you talk more about
Yeah.
priorities that maybe corporate events have?
Absolutely. I think when it comes to corporate events, the location and the talent and the food and beverage are like
Mm.
top of line. At least that's what I'm experiencing. Although, depending on what industry you're working in, for example, our pharmaceutical clients, we have very specific rules that we have to follow for their food and beverage. They really can't have entertainment. We can't even have them in venues that have entertainment. There are some very
Wow.
strict regulations among pharma groups. For the most part, when I'm thinking of the tech companies and the different hotel organizations that we work with, they want big name entertainment. They want a lot of
Mm.
fun for their clients, and typically they want some pretty darn good F&B. When it comes to things like photography and video, I see less of that or less money spent on it, right? They just like, it's not artsy. It's just very, I don't want to use standard or simple. I'm trying to think about what the right word is, but just really good documentation. Like they want
Right.
someone who is affable, who can go around and talk to the attendees and maybe get good testimonials and but still be a fly on the wall and capture things. But I feel like sometimes if you're really just this magnificent artistic photographer or videographer, that you're not going to be able to get the same rates as you do. I assume there are some that have climbed way up high in the industry that can
Mhm.
command some of those fees, but for the most part, that's not
Mhm.
where the money is going, from my experience.
That's so interesting because, like I said, Susan and I were kind of chatting before the show, and it's so interesting how some vendors can charge more in
Mhm.
corporate, and some vendors maybe wouldn't be able to claim quite the higher price. So,
Mhm.
if you're a photographer and you're really at the top of the price point for your market in weddings, know that, yeah, I mean, it could be a great way to fill weekday business, but it may be at a much lower price point
Mm-hmm.
than it would be for weddings. But maybe like a DJ would be on the flip side of that,
Yeah.
right? That they might be able
And
to charge.
depending on what other entertainment and what they can bring to the table for the client. Yep. But I feel like also now that I'm sitting here thinking about this, photographers have other opportunities that they could bring in if they associate with people who do things like the other day I was at an event and they had a photo robot, like the thing zipped around and you could
Yeah.
take selfies and stuff in front of them and, things like that. If they can help with branding opportunities, or sometimes if you're doing stuff for a trade show, maybe it's that you're providing them the imagery that they need, or so there are different ways that you can go into it more from a marketing standpoint.
Speaking
Yeah.
of marketing, have you seen content creators make their way into the corporate space yet?
I have seen some, not as much as
Okay.
you'd think. And that, again, could be our clients. It may be
Yeah.
that that's not, because a lot of our stuff is confidential and they don't want things shared or posted or displayed. But I feel like there are probably a lot of areas in the industry when you're looking at galas and award ceremonies and things like that, where you will see more and more content creation.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, what a fun way to be able to, put out a user event, possibly even
Hmm.
right on your social
Yep,
media. So you're wanting to draw in more users for your software or
exactly.
something like that.
Absolutely.
So if we have any content creators that are listening, I'm
Yeah.
like, my wheels are turning. I'm like, oh, that could be fun. Because a lot of corporate events are focused on branding. Like you said, there's
Yes.
a lot as well that you have to know that have confidentiality, but branding is a huge piece of it.
Absolutely, and even amongst their own employees, it's bringing
Right.
together, especially with so much remote work now. People wanna get
Yeah.
together, they wanna celebrate each other, they wanna get back to feeling like a team, and so, things like that they'll take place with the company loyalty, branding to the company.
Okay, you had just mentioned that you were at an event the other night that had this
Mhm.
robot. So,
Yeah.
what type of events do you feel like you make sure that you and your team are really focused on, attending to meet the right people? Or
Ah,
what areas would you say? I know this question always comes up cuz like I can already hear my listeners screaming at their podcast app like, "Randy, ask her like
okay.
where would you find these customers?"
So it's multi-level what we
Okay.
do. And of course, there's a standard like going to MPI, going to NACE, going to ILEA. Here we have the Las Vegas Hospitality Association, showing it up at all of those. That's one tier. But then we're meeting possibly some people who can refer us, but also a lot of people who are like us in the industry. And we meet a lot of suppliers that way also. Go to networking functions where the people who you want to work with are. For example, if you want to work with realtors, find out where they're going. Are they going to the chamber? Is there a real estate association that does events? Hospital associations that do events, doing charitable work, getting to go in and meet people that you can work with there, getting different business designations. One of my students is a certified woman owned business and she gets government bidding opportunities. And so
Okay.
that's where she gets it. And if I ever like reduce my email inbox multifold, I will get my status done so we can start being an official, women owned business. So that's a very good source. We also go to a lot of trade shows where we actually pay to be part of the trade show and we get appointments with potential clients right then and there. And they're called hosted buyer events. And these hosted buyers are required to make appointments with people. And we sit, we have our sales team sit at a table all day long for 2 or 3 days and just do appointments and pitch us and find out what other people's needs are. And we walk away with a lot of clients that way. And it's a big investment, those, but we have found that they can be extremely profitable.
That's so interesting. Okay, it's like a
Yeah.
whole different world. But
Yes.
some of the things that you mentioned, like NACE, ILEA, MPI, I mean, most major cities have chapters of those in your
Mhm.
local area, right?
Yes, you just have to see what the strong categories are,
Mm.
because for myself, going from city to city, I'll find one city has a major NACE
Chapter, yeah, yeah,
chapter. Thank you.
yeah.
And in another city, it's ILEA. That's really big. Now, in Las Vegas, where I am, there is no MPI chapter because we're
Oh,
almost all suppliers and no meeting planners. So when we want to go to MPI, we go to California and we'll attend an MPI meeting. Yeah, it's a $40 flight, easy squeezy. So, we'll fly in there for a little bit. But, you just have to find out, what's strong in your area and where
mm.
people are meeting.
Do you feel like any wedding vendor could get into corporate events? I mean, is it pretty much all corporate events need the same, right? They all
I
need
feel like it's
photographers,
the
DJs.
same basic amount of knowledge. It's learning how to
Okay.
network with the right people. It's changing your mindset from a one and done type of
Mm,
relationship to how can I keep forging this relationship on and moving ahead. I feel like it's a lot of relationship building and a lot of relationship keeping. So in our industry, it's a constantly renewing supply of brides, right? It's just a different way of thinking of marketing. In corporate, I feel like you think of things for the long term. It's not my client right here right now. It's my client for the next 10 years if I'm lucky. Or I
mm.
mean, we have some that are going on 15 years that we've had, and year after year, event after event after event.
I think
Yeah.
that is a really interesting. I'm glad that you touched on that mentality shift because, not only is it not just one and done, the mentality of the client here and now, but it's also that you don't have to keep trying to get new
Yeah.
clients over and over and over again, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't have to churn that sales cycle.
I mean, I think it's important to we do a maintenance of both, right? We make
Okay.
sure that we take really good care of the clients that we've had on and on and on and on, but we are constantly looking for new clients because you never know. Like because we work in pharma, all it takes is for a pharmaceutical company to lose a patent or to have a drug not get approved and suddenly they have no events for the year. So that's why we're not only in pharma, but we do tech and we do, all sorts of different types of companies. You have to make sure to have not all your eggs in one basket.
And that goes with weddings too, right? Like you don't want to have only like two venues where you're preferred or one
Yes.
planner that you get all your referrals from because all it takes
Yes.
is one thing
Yeah.
and you're out.
Someone to move on to another job. Yep.
That's right. That's exactly
Yeah.
right. Okay, so Susan, tell us a little bit more about the course. Like what would people learn inside the course?
I work with everyone on finding their niche, what
Okay.
types of corporate events do they want to do? And there's so many different types. How to charge, the way to negotiate multi-year contracts, how to work with multiple stakeholders, because now it's not even just bride, groom, mom, dad, things like that. I mean, it can go on and on from committees all the way up to, well, I have to have it approved by the chief marketing officer or whomever. So, how to
Yeah.
work with all the stakeholders, how to do a good RFP and a good, response to an RFP. So there are a lot of good things that while I said you all have the knowledge, right? People in the
Yeah.
wedding industry have the knowledge. They just have to learn how to repackage it.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the things that surprised me the most about corporate events was there's so much more work pre-contract
Yeah.
than there
Oh,
is for
yes.
the wedding.
Yeah, it's actually interesting you brought that up because that is kind of a surprise to a lot of my people.
Mhm.
They're like, well, we're giving them all this information and they haven't even hired us yet. Well, yeah, that's
Right.
right. They want to know what things are going to cost up front and what you can do for them. And so you may find yourself putting in work to proposals. And, at some point you have to be good at having a standard one that's just like, here's what you can expect all the way through. If you're trying to get a $2 million piece of business, you may have to do a whole lot of legwork first and hope that you get the piece of business before you'll actually see an income from it.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. Which, for me, that was definitely a mindset shift. I think for some of my students, I'm glad that I'm not the only one, but you kind of learn that and you're like, wait a second, like in the wedding world, we would never, the same as doing a budget and a design board before they ever sign a contract. But I think it's
Yeah.
just the way it is in corporate and, understanding that. I think that's what's interesting about your course is like, those are the kind of things that, you hit the nail on the head. Most of our listeners, most of the people who would be interested in doing and adding corporate events have the knowledge. It's just a matter
Yeah.
of knowing, okay, well, what step comes first? And then
Hmm.
what of the things I already do have to be just tweaked
Yep.
to fit it, right? To fit
Yeah.
this new mold.
And I think also what my students benefited from so much is having me as kind of a backbone, saying,
Yeah.
yes, you can do this. Yes,
Yes.
this is what you're going to ask for. And then being so surprised when there's no pushback, when they're like, okay, well, not only do I have this hourly fee, but here's my fee for staff on site. And this is how this is going to be billed and things like that. I think that it takes getting used to. And even though
Yes.
some of them have booked several events, they still come back and they're like, hey, we sure I can do this? It's just knowing that sometimes you take a deep breath and you jump and you may miss, but that's okay because
That's
there's more
okay.
down the pike. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. You guys have heard me actually tell my story about learning how to price my full service clients. And Susan was the one who taught me that as well. And it's like when you understand the pieces of the puzzle,
Yeah.
it makes it one, you're much more confident walking into that proposal or
Hmm.
putting out that RFP, right? Like saying, okay, this is my price, but also having you kind of behind the scenes saying, saying like, yep, keep walking. Like you
Mm-hmm.
got it. Be the
Yep.
confident one. I think
Yeah.
is a really big game changer.
Yeah, for sure.
This is exciting. Okay, so if you're listening to this and you're like, yes, I want to add corporate events to my calendar for 2025 because it's literally the easiest way to add 5 figures to your revenue bottom line without having to give up more weekends, then I want you to head to the description below. We're going to link Susan's course. You guys, she's going to be teaching it live for only the second time, and this will be the final time that she teaches it live. That means that Susan, for 6 weeks, is going to walk alongside you, and she's going to literally help you put together your own RFP. She's going to help you find what events to market to in your market, in your area. She's going to help you to know what niche you should get into and how you should price yourself. And when you get that first big lead, she's going to walk you through exactly how to put that proposal together because she's going to be teaching it live. I'm telling you, this is the time that you do not want to miss joining her course, Cashing In on Corporate Clients. So make sure to grab your seat in the show notes below. It's going to be such a great time. I'll be there for a lot of the course as well. And it starts in January. So you can grab it now. And then we are going to start that course the week of January 13th. And we cannot wait to see you there. Susan, thank you so much for being here. I feel like you're always just such a wealth of knowledge. And I cannot wait for a lot of our listeners to grab their spot in your course so that they can really add these 5 figures plus to their business in 2025. So I really appreciate you being here. I can't wait to see how it goes.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to be able to offer this course. And as always, it's so much fun to be with you.
All right. See you next time.
See you next time.